So, a wealth of knowledge, yeah, that'll work the best. Just put it around your neck, and they can hear you. There's But with that, I'm going to let you listen to Candy.
Okay. Like Aaron said, I just did, actually my official retirement date is October 1. So I took the fork, you've heard the fork, and then that was something they put out through government trying to get rid of us. So they decided they was going to move me someplace, and I said, you're not moving me anyplace. I moved when I came here to Kansas, but our farm is still in Iowa. So I don't want to move another place because I've only got 3 years left till I officially retire. And I happen to get on with Kansas Association of Conservation Districts as their wheat program person. So we're trying to get more regenerative wheat, even though people hate wheat like rice. You'll learn about how much rice hates wheat when he gets up here and speaks. But there are people like Colby Stegman who are doing some great things with wheat. And there's ways we can make it a little bit cheaper. But it is a good addition to your rotation, even if it's not, I mean, even if you can reduce your inputs, from a profitability standpoint, it can improve a lot of your other crops. And there's a lot of research out there showing how it's improved a lot of other crops. Like if you're in the east, and I know no one probably really is, but 25% yield increase in your corn and beans from just having wheat. So a lot of people will say, well, we don't have a market for it. So, you know, that's part of the problem is if you're wanting to improve any kind of part of your rotation, just from a one crop or a two crop system, is finding that market. How do you go about doing that? Not the easiest thing. If you get to go to Soil Health U, there'll be a gentleman speaking there by the name of Steve Tucker. He's a good friend of Lance's, and the guy's like a marketing nut. I mean, like crazy. He said he goes to Denver to the food meetings they have there, and he wears a shirt that says, I grow regenerative crops, what's your superpower? And he said a lot of people come up to me and just ask me about that, and he picked up, well, the last time I sampled at his place, he was doing garbanzo beans or chickpeas, and we went out and sampled, and I was like, what made you do this? He goes, well, some guy said he needed 120 acres worth of garbanzo beans, so he's like, I can do that. Never grown them before. He just planted them, grew them, and we were out there doing some soil sample in the later part of August, and he had cut them, and they were regrowing. He goes, I could get another crop off of this. So yeah, that guy is a crazy man. But what they wanted to talk about specifically was trying to increase your yield from adding wheat to crop rotations or enhancing your harvest through strategic crop rotation methods. So how do we go about improving our soil is through diversity, obviously. A lot of the soil biology likes diverse root types. Every plant leaks out, just like we leak out, we sweat, we urinate, we, defecate. Different smells, different items, all different kinds of properties that come out of us, the same as the plants. And they signal to different biology in the soil to make an association with them. So some people, I don't like smells, especially human smells. And so I try to avoid being near humans when they're shredding because I know that's not a turn on for me. But some people really enjoy the smell of other people. So there'll be an attraction of some sort for that smell. It's the same thing with the biology. So we can't just say all bacteria associates with all plants because it doesn't. We've got disease-causing organisms that associate with a lot of our plants that provide us with phosphorus. Even though they cause a lot of problems when we're looking at, all of these different types of diseases, even fungal diseases. A lot of our fungi that are in the soil, they associate with different plants, provide us with phosphate solubilizing microorganisms. So we've got to have different plant types, root types, architecture underneath the soil in order to make these different associations. So, basic principles. Obviously, I'm sorry, that is kind of small. If you're in the back and you want to move up, there's room up here. We've got all kinds of room, don't we? So if you need to move up towards the front, go ahead. And like I said, and that's just that very, very first bullet, improving soil health, rotating crops enrich the soil by replenishing nutrients, maintaining soil structure for better growth. When you look at vegetable crop production and you look at a lot of organic producers, they always try to follow a high nutrient using crop with a low nutrient using crop, a deep rooter with a shallow rooter. It's all about the rotation and putting it together so that you can maximize that utilization within the field. We don't do a lot of that because in a lot of cases, and Bryce will talk about it, is because of crop insurance. You know, a lot of people are paid to grow something. This moved completely around my neck, just noticed that. They're paid to grow certain crops at certain times of the year, and therefore it's easy just to stick with maybe a one crop system. Or out here, the fallow system, which is not the best at reducing pests and disease. A lot of the problems we have in the western part of the United States is because of fallow. We've allowed weeds to try to improve their habitat. I mean, it's all about succession. Nature abhors a vacuum, and therefore it's going to put plants out there in order to eliminate that vacuum. It's going to put a plant out that you really don't want there. And most recently, the scourge of the earth is windmill grass. Everybody out here that's in a no-till system is having a really difficult time with windmill grass. There's the Palmer amaranth and the pigweed family. The amaranth family is native to the United States. It's not one of the weeds that was brought in. Went to Europe just recently, was looking at crop fields, lots of lamb quarters, lots of the same weeds we have here, so you know where they came from there. But amaranth is a native plant. Palmer amaranth is native to New Mexico. And thanks to blowing and flowing soil, we got some of it, and so it's here. And it's moving north, and they're scared to death that it's moving east. Iowa is petrified of Palmer amaranth right now. They're afraid. They got a little bit in some CRP seed, and that guy's field was like quarantined. He was not allowed to move equipment. They wanted him to, go out and spray down everything he had because they were afraid that that was going to get an escape and be out on other people's places. But you can see how it moves, and you can see when you harvest how you move it. And it's always in rows until, or like kochia, once it gets big enough, it detaches and rolls, and you'll see where it rolls through fields. And you just follow its progression across the land. And it's all there because we're naked. We don't have enough cover. That pest and disease, a lot of those are alternative hosts for a lot of diseases. These weed species can be. They're also there because we got a lot of nutrients in the soil. They love high nutrients. There's a good book called When Weeds Talk. That's really an interesting look into what you may have as an issue and why you have that issue. Maybe because you have too much of this or too little of that. A lot of it's calcium related. And of course our biggest and most diminishing issue we have on all our cropland across the whole United States is carbon. The carbon drives the nitrogen cycle, drives the phosphorus cycle. There's a red field number. It's kind of an interesting paper. I stumbled onto it through Rick Haney. He wrote a paper on soil stoichiometry. And you're like, what the heck is that? Well, it's how carbon drives our nutrient cycling. So the carbon drives the nitrogen, the phosphorus, the potassium, the sulfur, and so on and so forth. And this red field number shows that we need around 106 parts of carbon to 8 parts of nitrogen in our soil. That allows natural nutrient cycling. But we don't really think about that, and we don't look at that. But the more and more you start reading about, or you look up the red field number, you'll notice that it's tied to the seas. And these soils that you are farming on were derived from the ocean. So this was the lacustrine type soils that covered all this area. And there's a lot of people find the megalodon sharks, they're finding, small shells, all these different things in our soils. So they are marine-based soils initially. It's covered with ocean water. So that red field number kind of works out really well. So the more carbon we can get in the system drives more of the nitrogen, the natural nitrogen, organic nitrogen, and so on and so forth. That's that optimizing nutrient use. And the more different crop types that we can use helps replenish, what we're taking. Because what we're trying to do is mimic succession with annual crops. So we're trying to keep that in this low level succession period. It wants to get to where a native state, which you all know is go back range, right? You leave a field out here alone, it'll be covered with weeds for the first 2-3 years. About year 4 or 5, you'll start to see some perennial grasses pop up. Usually the early successional grass that comes about here would be grandma's or side oats grandma. That's the early one that really establishes fast. So look at your native vegetation. What are you growing naturally where you're at? And try to mimic that. Corn is really out of place here. This is not a high biomass part of the world. You don't grow high biomass on your rangelands, do you? It's short grass, mid-grass prairie. So it doesn't make sense. And this is a Dale Strickler thing, and he's always saying, you shouldn't be growing this crap out here. That's his philosophy. I mean, you've got plants out of place. But we are trying to mimic that succession, that short-term succession. We're gonna stop it, kill that plant, harvest it off, and then we want to put in a new early successional plant in its place. Unfortunately, you've got those invaders. So you got to trick it. How you trick it is by using this rotational farming. So it originated from indigenous and traditional agriculture knowledge passed through generations. There's a really good book by Jeffrey, I always forget his last name. It's called The Mysterious Rise and Fall of the locust, the Rocky Mountain locust. And that book is really interesting in how that insect came into this part of the world and changed the way farming happened. So it brought in, because wheat was the predominant crop that was being born or planted here in the 1800s. Everybody said, come out here and grow wheat. We're growing it armpit high, it was lush and thick, until of course the droughts come. But this plant coincided exactly with this Rocky Mountain locust that flew from the scree in the Rocky Mountains where it hatched out. That's why the grizzly bears are there. And they're digging through that rock scree and they're looking for the pupa because it's yummy. It's one of their main food resources. So it's kind of sad to see that a lot of those types of locusts are leaving because that's that food resource they're losing. So they're looking for alternative food resources, which is us, of course, with our garbage food that we feed them. But, long story short, that locust flew out here and was just decimating the wheat fields, just eating everything in its path as it moved from west to east. When I got to the river, it couldn't cross because they could only fly so far, and then they land, and they fly so far, and they land. It couldn't cross, so it stopped at the Missouri River. Didn't get much further than that in the Mississippi. So we didn't see it too far east. So they were like, well, what do we do? How are we going to farm this land? What's our alternative crop? They looked to the native people that were there. They were growing corn. And it was out of season, out of sync from this locust. So this locust wasn't eating that green, yummy vegetation at the time that it was wheat. It was all out there. So they figured out, well, if we change and go from wheat and we move to corn, Jeffrey Lowenfels, that's his name. No, not Lowenfels. Oh, I'll look it up. I've got it on the computer when we get to the one section there. Lockwood. It was an L. Thanks. Someone always Googles it. Thank you for doing that. Jeff Lockwood. It's a really good read. It's one of the most interesting books I've ever read, and ArangeCon told me to read it because it's how we shaped a lot of our native rangelands. It's how a lot of our native rangeland changed, because we didn't have buffalo everywhere. A lot of it was these locusts moving in, defoliating. We get regrowth, you get buffalo. They love the tender, young, succulent plants. So it wasn't always fire, it wasn't always predators. A lot of it was insects, how that changed. And that's how they figured out we can grow other crop types. It's not going to be impacted by this locust. These locusts are gone now. I don't know if you knew that. They're totally 100% dead. They are finding them now that all of the glaciers are melting in the Rockies. They're finding them in the glaciers, though, from that scree area that hatched out and got trapped in the snowstorm. They're finding some of their dead bodies still. If you read the book, it's pretty interesting. But that's one of the ways they did. Then they evolved, of course, to modern science, where they looked at what kind of what kind of rotational farming can we do to optimize soil health and crop yields? Well, obviously, it's not continuous wheat. It's not wheat fallow. Some folks are moving to wheat sorghum or wheat corn, but it's also looking at other different crop types. So we need to think more about broadleaves that are available to us, cool season and warm season, because you have a lot of opportunities here. Look at not only just the crop type, but there's water use efficiency. And a lot of our cover crops, there's a cover crop table that shows a lot of the water use efficiency through ARS. It looks like a periodic table. It's called the periodic table of cover crops. I think it's just a cover crop chart. And it shows water use, and it has a lot of the crop types on there, and it shows you which ones are low, which ones are high, so you can kind of plan out what type of crops would work best in your environment. Less biomass, smaller fruit size, uses less water. That's why wheat thrives out in this part of the world so well. And then rotational farming helps maintain and enhance the soil nutrients, preventing depletion and erosion. So keeping the soil covered, having enough biomass growth that you get plenty of cover after you go through that succession period. Some benefits of legumes, of course, is they do fix nitrogen, but can be at the detriment of the following crop. So instead of looking at soybeans, maybe consider peas, dry beans, cowpeas, or some that tolerate less water. Just because the fact the soybean comes from China, it's in a higher rainfall. It evolved from a higher rainfall. It needs more rainfall. And of course, it needs to associate with rhizobia to make that nitrogen available. And all legumes associate with some type of bacterium, rhizobia or rhizobia, and it needs carbon to do it. When your organic matter rates fall below 3%, like we were talking about out in the field, we have a lot more problems with it trying to find carbon to make that association. It has to trade. This is all about bartering. The old world system. We're not, using money. We're using carbon as our commodity that we're trading in order to get something from it. So, like I said, each plant needs around 700 pounds of nitrogen, so you can see that's a lot of nitrogen it's making. And in order to make carbon, remember I said in order to get nitrogen to work, you've got to have carbon. All that's related through that red field type number. Cereal crop rolls, obviously here is huge, but root advantages. Root crops, like we were talking outside, fibrous roots breaks up soil, and it contributes to organic matter, but a small percentage. We used to believe that the amount of biomass is how we get organic matter. Well, they had around, I found an old document. Someone's like, hey, how much organic matter has Kansas had? So I finally found something down by the old, that old national park that they have where all that old rangeland is. Someone took a reading from there back in, I think it was 1860. He thought, well, I'll just bake it, see what happens. So he weighed it and he baked it just like they do in the soil survey, or in the soil offices, or wherever you send your lab, to your lab. They bake it at a high heat, 600 degrees. They burn off all the carbon, then they weigh your mineral soil back, and the difference is your percent organic matter. He did that, and there was around 6% down in southwest Kansas, that bottom tier county. Native vegetation is what he found. It's the oldest thing I could find. A lot of our soil survey guys will say, yeah, probably around 5 or 6. They do not believe though it can ever get higher than that the native vegetation is going to limit you. And that's the old thought process. Now that we've got people like Tyler and Colby and Bryce who are looking at these, and even Lance who are looking at these alternative ways of trying to feed their plants, they're finding new ways of attracting carbon to their fields by bringing it in the way of compost teas, even composted manure. Those different items are adding to that carbon that we need in order to increase organic matter. Once we put those different additives out there, that enhances the biology. And the biology feeds on biology. It's all about eating and being eaten. That turnover then turns into your organic matter.
So around 60% of our organic matter now is made up of the dead bodies of microbes that are stuck to each other and those soil colloids inside those aggregates. That's why those aggregates are so important. That's where your organic matter's at. And we can increase it. So looking at different types is important because that organic matter then can be increased, not only just from those root, because of the root exudates, because they're, you know, signaling to other biology out there, but limiting the disturbance so that we get them to do it for us instead of making them lazy. Oilseed crops is another one, something that is kind of coming around with canola and some other things. Sunflowers used to be the big, I told the people in North Dakota we should relinquish the sunflower state from Kansas to North Dakota, because that is the true sunflower state now. I've never seen so many sunflowers. I thought I'd come here and it'd just be wall-to-wall sunflowers. You know, that's all you hear about in Iowa. Oh, you need to go to Kansas to see sunflowers. And now it's not. You go to North Dakota, that's where the sunflowers are. It's kind of amazing the amount of them up there. But those oilseed crops need a market, obviously. And once that market turns, mainly because of the way we are setting prices due to a lot of our commodities, and Bryce will talk more about this, is kind of a hindrance to our crop rotation. It's really limited our ability to maximize the amount of crops that we can add into a system. But there's one producer that I visited with a lot, Dan Forkey in South Dakota, and by himself, him and one guy now are farming. I think he's got 15 different crop types that he's doing. You know, like, there's no way you could do that. He said, yes. When I had corn and beans, there's no way I could do it. I had to have 10 guys helping, because everything's coming at once, and I gotta have all these people out there getting it, bringing it in, and I gotta have all these people out there planting at the same time. He said, now I've spaced out my rotation, that I can plant when other people aren't, I can harvest when other people aren't, and I can take time then, you know, to think about cover crops a little more deeply and where I'm gonna put them and fill some niches. So he's always trying to keep the soil covered with a living plant, and that's why he transitioned to these different crop types. Very difficult marketing wise, you're thinking, right? He's found the markets. It's not easy, like we said. The role of wheat in crop rotations. And it's been here since the 1800s, correct? When they did the big land grab and everybody moved out here to western Kansas from Russia and Europe, mostly. Everyone moved out here to grow the big crop because they were told this is where you can grow, you know, the best wheat is in southwest Kansas and western Kansas. There are a lot of different, there's a lot of different varieties, and obviously, you know, K-State puts up these plots all over. I just recently read the North Central or the South Central plot variety trials that they did. Look at those very closely, especially from the type of management that they do. So if you're interested in no-till, don't look at those conventional tilled plots at all, because they're going to skew you on what the potential is for the variety that you choose. They do have some, they're still doing some no-till. Now granted, some of those plots, of course, are over-fertilized. In fact, I went to a meeting for ADM, because ADM is trying to transition to 100%, believe it or not, regenerative wheat by 2027.
100%.
Yeah, I know, you're like, what? Yeah, they are, and they have partnered with K-State, and unfortunately, their idea of getting to this protein content that they need was putting 2.5 times the amount of fertilizer out. So not just one unit, but 2 units, and then another 50%, or was it half another unit at Feeks 5. And he's like, look how green it is. And I was like, well, yeah. You just poured out all of this fertilizer. Of course it's gonna be green. I mean, he's showing the plots on his, you know, where they didn't do this. That was to get their protein requirement that they need for this program that they're doing. But there's people in this room even that have figured out how to do this without having to do it that way. And using varieties, local ecotypes that they're which we would call epigenetics, keeping seed year after year that survive in your area, that have adapted to the way you're doing things, is probably the best way to do it. Nutrient requirements, wheat required, if this says wheat, this I got off of the internet, wheat requires moderate nutrient inputs. K-State obviously did not read this at all after seeing that. Making it efficient and sustainable for many farming systems. And that can be true, it just needs to be managed differently. And that's something that, you know, a lot of people have never thought about. How do you manage wheat differently than you do the way we've been taught to do it? Like I said, that crop rotation benefit does provide, but here it's 100% wheat most of the time, so we need other crops in. For the yeast, this would provide an excellent break in weed and disease cycles. So it is compatible with a lot of other crops. Of course, it's going to change your carbon to nitrogen ratio quite a bit. So wheat after corn, you're going to need more nutrients, obviously. That's a lot of residue we're putting out there that has a lot of nutrients tied up in it. So your nitrogen reserve, your profile nitrogen, it's tied up. Because you've got biology out here trying to break this down. And they need nitrogen. Just like unlike rice, who now has eliminated all carbs in his life, so he's hoping his fat is going to replace his carbs. When you think about carbon, when you think about the diet where you go keto, you eat meat, right? And the goal is that your fat then is going to supplement you for the carbon. We have to have carbon and nitrogen, and fats in order to do our daily processes. Like get up, walk, talk, do all of these things. Carbon's energy. And so if you can't get that energy from your food, then the goal is that it's pulling from your fat. If you stay, the unfortunate part of that problem is if you stay on that diet for a long time, people start to get sluggish, you know, they have no energy, and it's because of the carbs. So the thought is you do it for X amount of days or a month, then you start transitioning back in carbs in the form of vegetables, fiber, that type of thing. But just like a beef cow, they need carbon, they need nitrogen, and they need fats so that we can make protein in our bones. And this soil does the exact same thing. It's a lot like us. And so rotating wheat and legumes and cereals and provides a lot of our soil nutrients. It just needs to be timed right. Nutrient cycling optimization. Intercropping wheat aids nutrient cycling, enhancing soil fertility, and crop health sustainability. These are all things we know. But from a market standpoint, very difficult to do. And it leads to farm resilience. If we're doing continuous wheat, you know, we've seen what happens with that. Eventually you end up with such weed pressure, you need to do something different. And for some people that becomes tillage. And even K-State, which was a big proponent, which was great, of no-till, they pushed no-till in this state like nobody's business. And Kansas was #1 for no-till wheat in the United States for many, many years, until just about 5 years ago. And that number is starting to slide. And why is that? You can't control the weeds.
Weed on weed. A lot of struggle and disease.
Yep, we end up with a lot of problems, not just weeds, but yes, disease as well. We're starting to see that problem, and it's not a good thing. And so we need to start transitioning more of these other crop types back into the system. And maybe it may not be a crop type. It might be cover crops. And you make an association like Lance did with Lordings and find someone who can graze it for you. So at least you have a break from that system. A lot of problems are seasonal timing. Proper timing of wheat planting is essential to align with seasonal weather and optimize growth conditions. So everybody always talks about cereal rye and what a bad boy it is, but like Bryce and I was talking, it doesn't matter if it's cereal rye, if it's triticale, if you're growing seed wheat, there's a grass somewhere near you that is going to be a green bridge. It's just the way of it. But the more resilient your soil is, the less issues you will have with this disease. If if you get infected by fungi in the soil, that's a positive infection, like our Bosquilla mycorrhizae, you're not gonna get infected with wheat stripe rust. I remember when Bryce called me, what was that, 5 years ago? What am I gonna do? All my neighbors want me to go and spray, and I don't wanna spray because I'm worried about my fungi. I was like, can you just go out, fill your sprayer up with water and just water it? Because everybody was pressuring him, and it's not just, the university, you're getting neighbor pressure.
Yeah.
Well, look what you did. You put this thing out here and now you're causing me problems. So how do you deal with those issues? Is building the resiliency in your soils. And then going out and just spraying water on your fields instead of fungicide. Because there is nothing out there that says what kind of impact these fungal strains that you're trying to be killing, what they have on soil, effect on soil. So fungicides, I was told by K-State, well, you don't need to worry about contact fungicides. That's not gonna be a problem. So go ahead and just spray, quill everywhere, because it's contact. You're not gonna have any problems with soil. It's the systemic ones you need to worry about, because then they'll leak out in the roots. I was like, how do you propose that you don't get any on the soil when you're spraying across the whole field? So there's still potential there, but like I said, no one's done the research yet, because I talked to hundreds of people when he called to find out what kind of impact that would have. And they'll say, well, yeah, either way, it's gonna be negative. If what you're trying to do is to get mycorrhizae in your soil, spraying fungicide is not gonna be a place you need to go. Even on corn. So right now I spent a day, that's why I'm sick, in 800 acres of corn. And we were running bricks through all these fields looking to see, what their bricks readings were. A lot of their seed, unfortunately, was transgenic seed. None of them ever got above 7. The Friday before, I was in a kid's field. They're new to regenerative ag, so they stopped they couldn't afford the transgenic seed. So they said, we went all non-GMO seed, just because we couldn't afford to pay $400 a bag for corn, seed corn. He said, I got this for 120. And we read his bricks, it was a 12. And if you listen to Dr., what's his name? The guy that came and he talked to us about bugs. Dykstra. Tom Dykstra came, and if you listen to him, he'll tell you we'll never see these transgenic seeds get above a 7. I didn't find any. It's very difficult to do, and it's all in the breeding and how they do away with those associations. So now they're trying to breed back a strain of bacterium that will make an association with your corn plant for your hybrid 490, 72, whatever it is. You've got to buy this for this bug that will make that association so that you can get nutrient cycling back going again. And they are patenting these bugs. So the only way you can get that association is to buy that specific one. That's just recently come about. And it's kind of scary that now we're patenting biotic in the soil.
How do you know if that's going to survive in your environment?
Exactly.
How do you know something might be an invasive species?
Exactly. Yeah, we don't. I mean, a lot of I know Bryce and Michael, who I've talked to quite a bit, they're using some Southwest type of, what is it? Is it, it's some little bug that he's been buying that it comes from yucca. It makes an association with yucca, which is a dry land, desert plant that you can put in with your corn that will get you more drought tolerance. And it works okay. Will it survive after the corn is gone? Maybe, maybe not. We don't know. Is that something that was native? We don't know. What is it? They only know about 23% of the soil biota that is actually living in the soil. They know who they are. There's less known about who's in the soil than there is in the ocean. So it's really kind of a black box, so to speak. We don't know for sure. Scheduling, and to me, I think this makes sense to do it on a spreadsheet. Look at each of your fields. Look at your transportation issues you may have from different crop types. how far you have to travel to plant with different types of planters, where it makes sense that you don't have to change from one planter to another planter in order to do a different crop type. Schedule that around all of these different issues that you may have if you have a lot of different fields, to make it more conducive to what you need to do. Okay, so soil fertility and nutrient cycling benefits. Wheat residue contributes quite a little bit, and we know it does, especially when you burn it, because they're still burning it in south central Kansas. There's people that still burn wheat because they said it to
Less
control.
than used to.
Yeah, there is less, but there's still some doing it, and Oklahoma is another place they like to do that. Because the mindset was it controlled what? Disease. And now they know.
Supposedly it gets rid of like cheap grass.
Cheatgrass, yeah. So that was a tradition that continued for quite a few decades. And now we know there are some herbicides they could use to control cheat, or they could change their rotation to control cheat, because it's a cool season grass with a cool season grass. Of course they're gonna be contrary. Plant a warm season instead of continuous weed. Change your mode of action. But it does add a lot of organic matter to the soil by providing a lot of food resource. I mean, you can get a lot of biology fed with a lot of stover on the soil surface. Like at Lance's, he had a thick mat there, and there was saprophytic fungi. Showed a couple of you in the pit, saw those little white filaments. And if you have gardens or whatnot in your home and you have mulch, you peel back that mulch and you see that white duff. That's the saprobes. They're breaking down that residue at that soil surface into smaller pieces so that the other biology can feed on it. They're extremely important. If you see mushrooms out in your wheat fields, that's a good thing, not a bad thing. That's a good sign that you are doing things correctly, you're not using a lot of fungicide, and that you've got saprobes out there breaking down your stover, so that they can turn it into organic matter. Extremely important. I've been a few places and seen actual mushrooms growing in wheat fields, and I was kind of excited about it. It's pretty neat. You can add the mushrooms, like Bryce has. He's used some stuff. That trailer, I usually drag that trailer all over that David was using, because he's like, you're here, why aren't you doing this? I was like, because you can do it. Everybody gets to see you do it, not me. Everybody's seen me do it. There's a mushroom that's been growing in that trailer for 2 years now, from Bryce's pans that we cut that had whole organics put on it. So there's lion's mane growing in the back of the trailer, which to me is pretty cool. I collected one piece one year, and it's still sitting on my dresser, it's all dried up. But there's a guy growing in there. Every year he gets a little bit bigger. I get it wet in the back, and he's surviving. I don't know how. This humidity has helped this year, but that helps a lot. Root systems and nutrient mobilization. Wheat root systems mobilize nutrients, making them more available for growth of subsequent crops. And a lot of that comes from older, probably more older wheat varieties than our new ones, because their root structure is significantly smaller than some of those older strains. So some people are going back to that kid that I went and read the 12 bricks in. They're like, we want to grow wheat. Well, we grew einkorn. I was like, really? And he's like, yeah, but now we have no one to hull it for us. So he's looking for someone to hull it for, and then they're going to start growing that, add that to their corn bean rotation. They never thought of doing it before, but they're like, we can see where we can put a cover and graze after that wheat, because they have cows. Because this is going to work out slick. So they were really thinking about how they were going to change their rotation on their fields, where they could do better cattle movement, and how they could move their cows from one field to the next, just depending on where they were putting the wheat. No-till impact on wheat-maize rotation versus conventional tillage showed a 31 to 33% increase in organic carbon and a 43 to 45% increase in water-stable aggregates versus tillage. Because remember, the aggregate is the most important indicator of soil health in my mind. I think Bryce has figured that out as well. It's where everybody lives. You provide the roofing, they'll build the house. And you've got to minimize your disturbance for them keep that going. This is out here in western Kansas. This is from, is it Larry Fridley? Yeah, Larry Fridley shared this photo with me. He's using cereal rye. If you can see, it's not the best picture in this light, but on the left-hand side, he did cereal rye. And on the right-hand side is his neighbor. And you can see that line clear as day from a weed control standpoint. What happened there with kochia? What's in a lot of our cereals when we think about what they do? Why are they growing out there, doing what they're doing on you know, a year-to-year basis? Why do you grow cereals? You grow them for the crop, right? For the wheat, for the berry. So you can harvest it and then you can sell it. Well, that plant knows how to keep that process going. So it produces an internal toxin that it leaks out of green tissue, so nobody can interrupt this process. And that's what happened here. You can see his neighbor had kochia, and it rolled across this field, and it got on Larry, and it kind of just started petering out. And you can see there's a couple pieces. And this is kind of like an end growth, so that's where all our totally destroyed soil is anyway. I was like, Larry, you ought to just put a nice pollinator strip through there, 10, 15 feet wide. I know it'll probably get sprayed out, but we should stop that from happening. But that plant itself releases this product called diboa. Wheat does it, oats do it, cereal rye does it, triticale does it. Any grass cereal produces this toxin, and it does it to keep its progeny alive. And so it can set up the best environment for its offspring. And different varieties leak out different amounts of this concentration. So like one of the best ones that I've looked up is Wheeler. Wheeler cereal rye has the highest concentration of diboa in it out of any of the other plants. Wheeler? Oh, D-I-B-O-A. Wheeler is unfortunately also used to make rye whiskey. It's very difficult to find. So if you can market for it. Yeah, there's a market for it. Pendleton, yeah. So if you can, or Templeton rye in Iowa, they've been producing Templeton rye in Iowa, but that's one of the main rye plants that they use. But if you've got a lot of weed pressure, think about the different kinds of cereals that are out there that can help produce this toxin so that you can keep small seeds at bay. The larger the seed, the less of an impact it has. You always hear these dudes out in the central part of the United States, well, I had a liliopathy effect here on this corn here, and I didn't get any growth out of that. The whole field is germinated, it just looks sick and yellow. What did they not do? Nitrogen. They didn't think about the carbon and nitrogen ratio there. It was all tied up in that stover, that rye stover on the soil surface. But they call it, they think it's a liliopathy inhibits germination, not growth. It can do growth, like walnut trees. They are highly liliopathic to a lot of different plants, even grass. So your grasses look kind of sick underneath walnuts, but it's still growing.
So then that diboa, is that a liliopathic chemical or is it a different thing entirely?
It's an alleliopathic chemical that leaks out of cereal rye specifically, but like oats has its own compound as well. And it's found in the green material. So once that material dries back, there's not a big of an issue. But if there's any green material out there, you're gonna have problems. Like planting milo right after wheat or after cereal rye and you still got green, you're gonna see some problems. I know I talked to Bryce about some folks out in Colorado who were trying to seed a bunch of prairie seed, and they planted wheat, and then they're like, well, none of this germinated. Well, they did it, they tried to plant green. It was not a good idea. It failed.
Does crabgrass have a similar toxin in it?
That's a good question. Crabgrass, and also, there's another one, besides crabgrass, Oh, it's a band grass no, not Johnson. It's a band grass in Colorado. And I can't think of the name of it, but they do have their own toxicity that they'll release. What is it?
Old World Blue Stem?
No, not old blue stem. It's it turns really green early in the spring, and it has a huge amount of protein, like 19%. No, it's a cool season. We're just gonna keep doing this until I go along about 10 minutes, and then I'll remember the name of it. But yeah,
Planted green into something like crabgrass, did you spray it dead and then your stuff germinating?
well, see, it's leaking out of the green tissue, so it takes a while for all that tissue to desiccate, and while it's desiccating, it's leaking that out. So you get some lasting herbicide effect from that. So it just depends.
I found a mistake,
Okay, well, that's good. So that results in lower chemical use if we can do that. Here's one more thing about the wheat, okay? I think I got 2 slides left. Improve soil structure and moisture retention, which is what everybody wants out here in the semi-arid west. It's kind of hard to see, but on our left, we've got our conventional system, and you can see up in here, we've got some space, and there's these little blue lines in there, that's water. But as we start to grade, we can move this line a little lower, and we start improving. This is our muscle mycorrhizae, the red, the yellow. And then when we go to no-till, it gets bigger. And then we move in and add cover crops, we get more root exploration. On Lance's place back in, what was that, 2013, 2012, 2013, they put the sensors on you, remember that? And he did no-till with cover crops versus no cover crop. And I've used Lance's slide for quite a few years just to show that cover crops do use moisture. And he found that out. And then he had a rain event after he terminated the cover crops. And what was really interesting was that spike in the amount of soil moisture that he got from where the cover crops were. So after he terminated them, he increased his water holding capacity from those dead cover crops. Even though they used moisture that whole time, the groundwater recharge increased. So that root exploration is important. Some research and evidence case studies. Rotation including wheat enhanced crop yields, we know that. There's improvement in soil health. Pest pressure reduction is another one. I'll get right to it because we can get to but I guess you can send them this stuff. So, did this just repeat to the beginning of my slides? It did.
You said you only had 2 left.
I did. I have the 2 from Dakota Lakes, his thing, and it acts like it did not save that. I think I lost my thing I did yesterday on all of it. Let me see if it went in my documents. I just had 2 slides from Dakota Lakes showing his what was yesterday, the 1st?
Yes.
Okay, well, I saved it, but apparently it did not save it, so I lost it. But here's his, this is the page, and this is what we were gonna kind of talk about.
Unless you hotspot, you don't have internet.
I do have my hotspot,
Okay.
if I can spell, D-A-K-O-T-A. So on Dakota Lakes webpage, they've got a page of resources. It's kind of an interesting lakes.
Research.
Oh my God, seriously.
Something like typing when everybody's watching you.
There it is. Look, I looked it up yesterday, so you know I really did do this, even though I didn't save any of it. So on their page, underneath they've got a resources tab. And that resources tab has a lot of interesting things that Dwayne has said in the past, I don't know how many years. You go to library. So he's got a document in here that you guys can go and try downloading. It's down here a little ways. And there's the power of crop rotations. This is the craziest thing you'll ever see. We couldn't even get him to teach it, could we?
He talked briefly about it, but he says people don't understand how to use it, so
Right.
they get in a
Lost.
wormhole, they get lost. So
Yeah.
he wrote it like, don't use it unless you understand it.
Right, so if you go through this and you read it, it talks about rotation and why rotation is important. And he talks about looking at where you're at and looking at the plants that are currently growing there, native plants. And then trying to mimic what native plants, you know, from an architecture type are growing there. Which is like, for here would be using flax and lentils and, you know, small statured, very low amounts of production on them, but they are very close to your mid to short grass prairie plants, and wheat, obviously. So as you get down here, he looks at intensity, so they look at this crop intensity and they'll score it. So you can see they go off of cool season and warm season crop types. Then there's summer fallow, and look what it gets, 0 points. So that's important. So then you'll put the different crop types that you're currently growing into this worksheet, and you'll come up with the number, you divide that by the number of years, and you'll get an intensity rating. After you do your intensity rating, then you look at your diversity index. And then there's quite a little bit in here you can read, but it gives you kind of a guide as to, you know, how well you could potentially do, given the chance. Wayne Beck. Yep.
You can get this on Go Lakes.
Yep. So then you look at this diversity index for crops, since he's got sample here. So same crops, remember that 6-year rotation, barley, then he's got winter wheat, then they go to field pea, then corn, then millet, and then canola. So barley gets an interval value of 4.5, and it explains why it gets 4.5 in the reading when you go through there. So you add all of those up, and it said to obtain a value, count the number of crops since the same type of crop was last used in the rotation. So see, we got canola here that's previous to barley. That's why the barley got the higher points, because it didn't have like wheat and then barley. It'd have been a half. But we have barley, and then we're doing winter wheat. So now you see why winter wheat is so low. That's 2 cool season cereals. See how he's thinking? But then we go to a legume, which is a cool season legume. Same family, cool season, but it's a legume, so he gets a 2.5. Then we go to a warm season crop, completely different family. That gets a high score of 4.5. Then we do another, you can see where we kind of date ourselves here with that half on the millet, because millet is a warm season grass, same as corn. But then we increase with canola. So that's kind of how it's scored. And once you get done, then you can put it into this worksheet that he's got down here. And it just kind of helps you plan, you know, yourself for the future. And then you also got to think about markets. Where are the markets at for each of these different crops that you have the potential to, you know, add to your rotation? From a crop insurance standpoint, I'll let Bryce talk about that. But what kind of, you know, are you going to have to move from summer fallow practice? Well, if you're going to do cover crops, yes, you're going to have to go to continuous cropping. If you're already continuous wheat, you're already in continuous cropping. So what other crops can you add to your rotation to improve your diversity? And remember, diversity is the key to biology. And then you provide the roof. And the more biomass you can grow, the better your roof is. So you've got to have big biomass with low biomass. Legumes are your low biomass. Your big biomass are your cereals, or your corn, or anything in the grass family. That's your biomass. And then the other thing that he has here that's worth a really good read is this, which I had in my presentation and apparently did not save. Rotational weeds on with Randy Anderson. So he looked at the systems and what kind of weed control you can get from just adding different crop types to your system. And by adding these different crop types, you can trick succession so that it's not wanting to try to put some annual crop out there with your crop to try to take over and cover the soil. So that's another really good one. And then the lastly is his, there's North Central, South Dakota, there it is. Successful no-till on the Central and Northern Plains. And this one's really good. This was my last thing I had, my very last slide. And here is what it is. Commonality among successful systems, that you have diverse rotations with at least a minimum of 3 crop types. primary method of pest control is that stacking that Randy Anderson talks about in his paper that him and Dwayne did on that research farm. So take a look at that. Crop environment is modified by the sequence: corn after pea, corn after wheat, corn after beans. Notice the legume helps feed the soil, or helps feed that, replenish that nitrogen pool that you're pulling from. Winter wheat after spring wheat after sunflower. Diversity within among rotations to spread risk, weather risk, pest risk, price risk. So you gotta consider all of those different types of risk that Bryce will talk about. And then lastly, crop more often with little or no fallow, because you'll hear them, you gotta take the E out of ET. That's a big issue there. And then I thought this was another interesting thing, heavy emphasis on sanitation, and like on our place, we've changed our seeding rate. We seed about like what you guys seed out here. And I get 30, what do I get, 32, 33 inches of
You're
rainfall?
like 36 or so.
32 to 33, yeah, kind of in line with Manhattan. Well, we decided not to pander to the seed dealer. My husband's all on board. The guy that plants our crop for us, unfortunately, is not. Because we gave him beans and we were like, we want to go to 100,000 beans. He planted them in 120, so I had a check strip about 50 feet wide with no beans, just cereal. It did a good job of weed control, but that's because he ran out of seed. It was at the edge of the field. He went around, you could see the end row where he went around. Then we had this nothing, and then the rest were beans all planted at 120,000. So now we're at 90. So he's gonna have an even bigger freak pit. And we dropped our corn, we're in corn bean country, that's where our market's at. But we have replenished cereal rye on a year-to-year basis. We don't plant it, it just comes. Because the guy who harvested our cereal rye blew it all over the farm. It is free, which is not a bad thing, right? So, don't be afraid of thinking about different seeding rates besides your different crop types.
Right, and you talked about doing away with summer fallow.
Yep.
This area is closer to the continuous cropping than if you just go lance.
Right.
We're just a little bit further.
Yeah.
And then the best way I heard it was when Tom Robinson spoke at conference, that you have to pay for the right to plant cover crops. Right? So until you get more roots, get more organic matter,
Yeah, and pay biologically.
it's gonna ding you
Sure.
at the beginning because you don't have available water, but the
Right.
more you plant, the more you get. It's
And the best
opposite.
way to transition to no-till is with cover crops, definitely. I mean, slowly minimize the amount of trips going across the field, start introducing the cover crop, so you stop that seizing up of the soil. Because that's what ends up happening, is you get soils that are hard as a bullet, because they're lacking that carbon. Remember, it's our most limiting resource. We don't remember anything else, it is our most limiting resource. We gotta add more
I
carbon.
got one question and we better get Bryce on.
One question, bug in a jug.
Bugs in a jug, oh, my favorite thing. Go ahead.
Just plant.
I mean, there's a lot of it out there.
Right.
What do we do?
And unfortunately, our administration has, and your senator, Marshall, has decided that they're gonna pay for a biostimulant. There's a biostimulant act. So if you are, see, now I can say this. Before, when I was Josh, I couldn't say this. If you're against this, make sure you let Senator Marshall know that you don't think bugs in a jug are a good thing and that we should be paying people to put on a thing. What we should be paying people to do is to transition to a system. And you've heard this time and again from like Dwayne Beck and everybody else that's been doing soil health in this room for years and years. It's a systems approach. You've got to build the habitat before you put the bugs in the jug on, or you're just putting more on. You've got more of the moron effect. And so, and like Colby said, what kind of impact is that bug gonna have? You know, Pivot Bio, everybody's like freaking out, Pivot Bio, yeah, let's put that on. Like all of Iowa wants to be paid to put Pivot Bio on. So they put it on corn, and guess what it is? It's a bacterium from a turtle. How many turtles do you know live in the soil 100% of their life cycle? None. None.
And it's just one species.
One species. Yep.
And it
Kielbasa is the name of its family.
can be living in a jug.
No.
Who's the author on that
Dr. Dwayne Beck, B-E-C-K,
Yeah, and
DW.
Dennis, you've got my number, if you forget, shoot me a text and we can
And
get it
if
to
you
you.
go to Dakota Lakes Research, you just type that in your search engine, whatever it'll be, you should get to his page, click on resources, and then go to, or click on library and then go to resources, you'll find that there. There's a ton of really good stuff that you don't really talk about anymore like you used to, but we need to bring it back because we need to transition back into a limited disturbance system, and the way to do it is by crowd type.
I was like, and we went to Dakota Lakes twice. What did he put on, 2 inches of water? We walked right behind the pivot and my feet were dry.
Yeah.
I mean, it's finishing watering the field as we're
He's
walking.
figured out how to do no-till. The thing I don't like about Beck's place is he has not figured out how to reduce nutrients.
He's pretty high
He's
fertility.
very high fertility, so his soils look a lot like yours, Lance, I think. He needs to start reducing, and that's because you're dry and getting no rain. He gets rain, but he's just adding another level of disturbance. Yours is weather-related, his is input-related.
Yep, okay, we better get Bryce on there.